What's going to happen next week in pop culture?
Gaze into the crystal ball. Ooh. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are going to announce that their wedding is going to take over Venice. No, they're going to go bigger. Their wedding is going to take over all of Kansas City. I loved Kansas. KCUR published an article saying Kansas City enthusiast Taylor Swift gets engaged to Kansas City Chiefs, whatever his position is.
People are calling that cringe. Is everything that a millennial does now just cringe automatically? Like, is this the fate that we all share? Because I didn't see anything cringe about just like normal engagement. Those were very basic engagement photos. They were nice.
Yeah.
But why now does everything every millennial does have to be millennial cringe?
I think, the part of it is the caption. Your English teacher and your gym teacher got married.
That was cringy.
That's
that
a little
was
cringe.
Yeah.
But no, I think you're right. I mean, getting older is cringe, deeply cringe.
Millennials have been like so screwed over the years. Like, we graduated into a recession. We were like hitting our stride and COVID hit. Like, nobody's going to have a house. And I just don't understand why millennials have to be the punching bag of all of the other generations.
It is truly like, yeah, we got all the hate from the boomers. And then now we're just getting all the hate from Gen Z.
And I will say, as an elder millennial, we were not hating on Gen X. We were like, they were pretty cool. No, Gen X, they had good music.
And they're not. Like, you were being nice. Like, Gen X is not cool.
They're ass. Gen X, you're ass.
Well, we're not getting any younger. It's time for Sound Politics. I'm Scott Greenstone.
And I'm Libby Denkmann.
And you're listening to Sound Politics.
And today we're going to do something a little different. We talk to lawmakers a lot on this podcast. We talk about donors. We talk about the public. But there's one group that is a big deal in this constellation of political power, but we don't often talk about, and that's lobbyists.
And it is a good time to talk about the lobbyists because over the past decade plus, as gridlock has gripped Congress, lobbying spending in states like ours has shot up.
As in, I guess, things keep running into a brick wall in D.C., and the money is going where laws are actually getting passed.
That's totally right.
So, Scott, earlier this year, you looked specifically at how Washington stacks up to other states in this area, right? What are you looking into? Yeah,
of the states that actually track that lobbying spending, ours has seen the steadiest, most dramatic rise over the last decade. $90 million were spent on lobbying in Washington state last year. That's more than double what was spent in 2014. Of states that track that money, only Colorado saw a similarly steady yet dramatic increase.
Wow.
Other states, obviously, it goes up and down. But the reason I bring up that like steadiness and that steady upward trend, I guess, is what I'm talking about, is to say lobbying is a growth industry in Washington. More lobbyists register every year. Last year, there were nearly 1,000 registered in Washington state. That's more than 6, Libby, for every one state lawmaker. And the money is national, right? But it's also local, like Amazon and DoorDash. They spend a ton on lobbying.
So that's for stuff like, hey, those delivery fees
right.
You might see pop up on your receipt.
Right, yeah. So like your pennies are in the pocket of a lobbyist, maybe in Olympia. Your landlord probably pays a membership fee to an organization that hires a lobbyist. So that's like your rent. Your taxes even pay for lobbyists. 85 cities and all 39 counties in Washington hire lobbyists trying to do things like raise your property taxes.
That is so wild to me. It's like you're lobbying on behalf of a city and you're taking taxpayer dollars to do that.
Yeah. So
but I guess you're benefiting as the taxpayer of that city.
You hope.
You hope that trickles down to be beneficial policy for you.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny, weird version of trickling down. But this last session, I wanted to get a sense of how lobbying works and how it actually affects the actual laws that get passed. Like, we see it, right, as this shady thing with backdoor deals and, just like
smoke-filled rooms.
Right, cigars. And I want to know, is that based on reality? Like, where are those rooms and can I get in them? How does lobbying actually impact the laws that get passed?
And so you picked one piece of legislation to follow here. Which one did you pick and why?
So I wanted to go for a really contested one because I thought that would be fun. And of course, no piece of legislation has been more furiously lobbied over in the past few years than limits on rent. Some people call it, you know it. Some people call it rent control. Some people call it rent stabilization. We have talked about it on the show.
Yeah, basically a limit on how much a landlord can raise your rent. I remember when this one passed this spring that emotions were really high. We had some debates about it, and it was a big deal. Yeah.
But we have not really talked about how that bill changed before it finally got passed. And, those change, like nobody was super happy about the way it changed. I think the lobbying aspect can tell us a little bit about why and how it changed the way it did. So, Libby, take my hand. We're going on a journey to Lobbyland.
Wow, what a magical place. Booze as far as the eye can see.
I'm going to introduce you to a lobbyist fighting against rent limits. Listen in on a heated discussion where he tries to convince a legislator to kill the bill, and then jump over to the other side to introduce a lobbyist advocating for rent limits to pass. So here we go. First, let's rewind the clock back to the legislative session in spring. Lobbyists are everywhere on the Capitol campus. They're chilling by the big sundial between the legislative offices, swapping gossip. They're crowding outside the wings of the State House and Senate during important votes, waiting for lawmakers. I feel
like you're setting the scene of like a Beverly Hills 90210 style, or maybe I should say the OC style, like a high school drama where you've got the like cool kids hanging out by the fountain.
Oh my God, that's totally what it is. I was like sitting there kind of like eavesdropping, and I heard like one person be like, how was your, committee? And it's like, oh, the Republicans are being so annoying. And then it's like, I ran into that one guy. That guy. We ran into each other at a party right near the Capitol. He's such a climber. I was like, you little climber, you. I'm so proud of you. It was very high school.
Yeah. I mean, that's what people who were really good in high school probably gravitate towards these roles, right? Who had like very strong social skills in high school.
The lawmakers are like the student government types. The lobbyists are like, I don't even know, like the business entrepreneur kids.
They're the student government types who wanted to make money.
Oh, that's so
true.
They're
the smartest of us all.
Well, now they are waiting outside, like as they, flock around the Capitol, right? Stay in this scene with me. They are waiting for lawmakers.
I try not to chase them down.
I'm standing with Chester Baldwin outside a Senate committee hearing. He's wearing a suit and a pink and blue Jerry Garcia tie.
Sometimes their office will be like, if you're in this hallway at this time, you can catch them and walk to their next hearing, or walk to their office, or walk to Ways and Means with them, or whatever, just for a quick walk and talk, because sometimes all you need is 60 seconds.
Wait, the Grateful Dead guy is a lobbyist?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
So he lobbies for wineries, plumbing, heating, and cooling contractors, and landlord groups, which is what he's doing today. Not all lobbyists are full-time, but he has been since the pandemic hit, because Chester Baldwin, that's his name again, he was a criminal defense and eviction lawyer, but when the pandemic hit, lots of cases and evictions were put on hold.
The lobbying business went through the roof because we were now in the pandemic actively, and no one knew what was going on. No one knew what was an essential service.
Okay, so deadhead, eviction lawyer, now landlord lobbyist. This guy has to know how that comes off, right?
And the only thing that might be more hated than lobbyists in America is deadheads. But so Chet is what he goes by. He is circumspect about it. He knows lobbyist is one of the most hated jobs in America, right? In January, a Gallup survey found 68% of respondents had low or very low opinions of lobbyists. Their net favorability was lower even than members of Congress. And get this, TV reporters.
Ooh, just taking a swipe at our more handsome colleagues, huh?
I'm just reading the survey results, Libby. Newspaper reporters were a little higher.
What about radio reporters, podcast hosts?
Oh, not in the survey, but I'm willing to guess, we'd be high, up with firemen.
Yeah, and like cancer doctors.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
Yeah,
universally
beloved. So Chet, I brought that up to Chet, and he would point out that he works for family businesses, small landlords, not like big corporate, like he calls them onesie-twosies, people who have a few units. And he says they need a voice too. And so he and the client he's working for today, the Rental Housing Association, have gathered a number of landlords in the hall wearing bright red shirts saying no cap. And that's not Zoomer slang, like no cap, facts on God.
I had to Google what no cap meant finally the other day because I saw a Zoomer like wearing a no cap shirt. And I said to myself, it's in meat space. I need to know what this means. And I was disappointed.
Meat space, not that one.
Yeah. But I assume here we're talking about no rent cap.
No rent cap. Yeah, that's what they mean. So Chet has been fighting for years to kill the rent limit legislation we talked about. He has won every year up until this one, but at this moment, as we're standing in this hallway, it is starting to feel like a losing battle. We're outside the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and the rent caps bill inside is closer than ever to passing. Landlords are making their final arguments in the committee hearing before the committee decides whether to send it on. And we're standing out in the hall, and out here, Chet Baldwin is duking it out with a Democrat.
There is this issue of this cap that is somewhere that we just very much disagree on what the policy.
My mom deserves to know what she's going to pay for rent every year so that she can budget appropriately. And many people on fixed income, particularly like my mom, deserve that same stability.
So that is Senator Yasmin Trudeau, a Tacoma Democrat, a big supporter of the rent cap. But she really doesn't like how landlords have been lobbying around it.
There hasn't been any willing conversations or negotiations from the landlord side. Not one. And I haven't seen one iota of bend or give from the landlords ever.
And this bill is about the cap in the bill. It's not about the rest of the bill. We could work on the rest of the policy.
The cap is the stability.
The cap is the stability.
Yeah. It became pretty clear to me that neither of these people are going to change their minds. And I did listen to them. I have a lot of tape with them arguing.
Yeah, there's no budge there.
I think, based on what I have reported, it seems like that's because it's a little late in the process. Where lobbying actually has the strongest impact, I've learned, is early. And we're going to talk about that after the break.
And we're back with Sound Politics. I'm Libby Denkmann.
I'm Scott Greenstone.
And today, Scott is taking us through the wonderful, whimsical world of lobbying.
We've been talking about one piece of legislation and following a lobbyist trying to kill it named Chet. Chet knows people don't like lobbyists, but he would argue they're actually an important part of the way information flows around Olympia. And I talked to an academic who has studied lobbying who said Chet might actually be right. Dan Butler is a poli-sci professor at Washington University in St. Louis.
I don't think lobbyists are inherently always evil. Among other things, they provide information.
Well, that's a ringing endorsement.
Not always inherently evil.
Yeah. What does he mean about that? Like providing information? What kind of stuff do lobbyists do along those lines?
So like it or not, lawmakers kind of rely on lobbyists. Hundreds and hundreds of bills are introduced in Olympia every year, dealing with, fisheries, highways, school funding, dental plans,
vaping, gun licensing, I don't know, like octopus farming.
The state dinosaur, you get it. Here's Dan again.
We expect our legislators to be voting on all sorts of topics about which they know very little.
And so in that kind of, space where there's a lot of bills and very little information or little knowledge, lobbyists can help, right? They represent trade associations with expertise or unions with on-the-ground experience. But obviously, they also have a big incentive to do their best to kill regulations and anything that's bad for business or that their members don't like. And while Butler's study found no evidence that lobbying buys lawmakers' votes once a bill is up for a vote.
I need to put a pin in that and talk about it later because I am really surprised by that, but go ahead.
That's according to his study. He couldn't find that it changes lawmakers' votes, but sometimes they don't need to. There are hundreds of bills every year the legislature just runs out of time to vote on. And Butler's study found lobbying definitely influences what they don't make time for.
Lobbying's not changing how people vote on a given issue, but it's changing whether it gets a vote. And that's an important power in American politics.
So in a sense, Chet, when he's outside the Ways and Means Committee, when the bill is getting voted on, he's already lost the fight. He's standing there arguing with the lawmaker, but it's over.
It's about to, it's really close to the end. It's about to get scheduled for a full vote for the full Senate and then go to the House.
And success for Chet would have been
does not even get
off.
there. Yeah, exactly. Every year before this one, he's managed to kill it before it got to this space, or lobbyists like him. Before we get to the end of the battle, though, I want to turn to the other side. So Dan's assertion, right? Dan Butler's assertion, the academic, that not all lobbyists are inherently evil. It maybe only feels right because when you're entering lobby land, Libby, it starts to feel a little bit like a moral no man's land.
Yeah, it's Thunderdome. We are in spiked leather outfits and there are no rules.
I'm a young millennial, so I feel like I don't really get that reference. I get the Mad Max Fury Road reference, not the Beyond. It's Beyond Thunderdome.
All right, so you're in Fury Road.
I'm the Chrome. Like we're in Chrome, I guess.
You can see Valhalla.
There we go.
Mm-hmm. I am awaited in Valhalla.
But the moral no man's land is how I'm going to introduce us to a guy some people call a white hat lobbyist, Nick Federici.
I don't think anybody sets out to be a lobbyist. If they do, there's something wrong with them probably. But people say, well, what do you do? And I'll go, and my wife will say, well, he's a lobbyist, but for the good guys.
Wait a second. We're in the Fury Road territory. Good guys, we're in the area where there is no good and evil. What does that even mean in this context? And why do you call somebody a white hat lobbyist?
Yeah, so he works mostly for human services nonprofits and service employee unions, the United Way of King County, people we don't tend to think of when we think of, evil lobbies. Except he also, this is the moral no man's land I'm talking about, he also had a turn as an oil lobbyist for a minute working for British Petroleum. So as we've discussed on this show before, they randomly supported the Climate Commitment Act because it had carve-outs for them. Do you remember that?
Yeah, he lobbied for the bill for BP because they were into it. I mean, in terms of regulations, they were okay with that.
They were basically like, we know something is going to pass eventually. We might as well fight to get something passed that helps us. And, working on that bill, he said he was happy that he was able to get it passed, but it wasn't a great match, and he does not work for BP anymore. It certainly, working for BP was not on Nick Federici's bingo card when he got into lobbying in the 90s. He's one of the, most senior lobbyists in the Capitol. When he started in the early 90s, he was just a low-level legislative analyst writing policy reports. And he didn't like that people didn't follow his recommendations.
I liked doing the analysis and making a recommendation, but I didn't like stopping there. So just wanted to be able to push a little harder than making recommendations and then having to take a knee. Scott, I hate to do this. I have a legislator calling me. Can I call you right back?
No, of course. Yeah.
My apologies.
So in the middle of all this, we're talking. He is working hard to get the rent limits bill passed. I can hear the texts pouring in while I'm on the phone with him. And I pointed it out to him. It's interesting. I can hear your phone sort of going off right now, and you just got a call a minute ago.
This is truly Mad Max zone, yeah.
Right. So at this point, right, the bill is moving. Nick Federici is happy, but stressed and definitely still sweating because suddenly what appears, in Nick's words, a bipartisan proliferation of amendments, people on both sides of the aisle seeking to drastically change the legislation.
Yeah, because this rent cap legislation changed a lot towards the end. So the number of how big of a rent raise landlords could make, that changed. And
Right, it went up.
Went up
yeah.
and down, yeah.
It was controversial, right? Obviously, Republicans are against the rent caps. But one of the things that has stymied the legislation in the past is a lot of Democrats have concerns, too. It's kind of a new, and we've talked about this on the pod before, but like it's kind of a new idea. We don't know if it's going to fix skyrocketing rents or potentially slow down development of new housing, which we also need, right?
Yeah, and that's something that we heard when we talked about this legislation was,
Right.
Using examples like from the Twin Cities, where new legislation seemed to come along the lines of, a slowdown in building. So whether or not you think big developers are evil, they are the ones that are building the most housing. And so it's natural that lawmakers are going to listen to what they have to say about how it might affect that building.
Yeah, and they're also listening to, obviously Chet would say, hey, I work for small landlords. They're not evil either. In the middle of all this, I get my hands on an email from some other lobbyists I hadn't even been talking to who work for the local chapter of the National Apartment Association. So that's like bigger landlords. And this email is basically like we're winning sort of update. It says, thanks to our lobbyists, the rent cap has been raised, new construction has been exempted, and this version of this legislation that will probably pass will sunset in 15 years. So it's far from perfect, but we think it's better. And after that email, there's more horse trading behind the scenes. The cap is lowered a little.
Wow, so they kind of declared victory, but
Sort
then
of.
the bill continued to change.
Right, yes. So what ended up passing was somewhere in the middle of what the advocates wanted and what the landlords wanted.
If I remember right, it was a little complicated because it ended up being that landlords can raise the rent yearly up to 7% plus inflation or 10% as a flat number. And it's whichever one of those is less. And that still leaves a lot of space for rent hikes. I mean, a 10% increase is a big number for a working person.
Even a 7% increase, right? I was trying to calculate that, say you pay $2,500 a month in rent, a 7% increase is still like around $200 a month. That's a lot. And that's why we're in this situation where nobody's happy, because the advocates didn't get what they wanted and the landlords and developers didn't want any caps on rent hikes. So they also didn't get what they wanted, right?
And Scott, after all of that, what has the actual impact been? These predictions about, the ways that the bill would actually affect renters or landlords, have rents gone up or down or stayed about the same?
It's a little early to tell. There was a news item in the Washington State Standard that said 8 landlords have violated this new law since it was passed, and they have been fined for raising rents on something like 250 tenants. So for those tenants, that it's had an impact. But average rents statewide have not gone up very much yet. It's only been about 3 months. But according to stats I've seen from Zillow, from May to July, just about $20 more on average across the state.
What about the construction side of things?
I mean, new construction has already slowed, but due to other reasons, like just the skyrocketing cost of construction materials right now.
Yeah, and labor. So you said at the beginning of this whole thing, Scott, that you wanted to explore how the rent limit bill changed the way that it did. What has your takeaway been from watching this whole process play out?
So going in, what I'd read was that it's harder to have Nick Federici's job. It's harder to lobby for legislation. You have to shepherd a bill through hoops and bottlenecks and persuade people to pass it this year, not next year or the year after, now, right? Because you can table it forever, like we talked about. It's supposed to be easier to kill a bill, even if you can't stop it from coming up for a vote at all. It's often still easier, at least from what I'd read, to stop it from making a cutoff deadline. And so what I think I learned is people like, Nick Federici, that white hat lobbyist, or really, to be honest, like advocates that I didn't have time to introduce you to who have been, persistent for years trying to get this passed, they can build momentum year after year. They can get the upper hand with something like rent limits where the rent does continue to go up and up, often above our ability to pay or often faster than wages. So one
That's
year,
a pretty slow process, though. I mean, to build that over the
it still took
over
years. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it still took years. I mean, 1 year, it might not get a hearing. The next it does, but it fails to pass the committee by one vote, if you remember that. Then the next, it's passing, but in this, I think what advocates would call watered down form. So the question that I have is next year, does that momentum continue and the rents keep going up, and do they lower that cap further, like closer to what the advocates originally wanted? Like, was this enough of a win that they're going to get what they want eventually? Or does something bad happen and, they decide to just repeal it, right? Maybe more landlords decide to raise the rent up to that limit, right? Since they say, well, if I can't raise it, what a lot of our landlords argued to me is like, if I can't raise this when I need to in the future to cover some of my bills or my legal fees or something like that, then I'm going to raise it 7% every year. I'm going to raise it as much as I can every year, and it'll guarantee that the rent goes higher. Now, we don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll see. And so I'll be really interested to watch how the legislation changes.
I've got a couple takeaways that, I thought of when you were talking about all this. One is, you talked about how effective lobbying is earlier in the process. Like, that's really when you get something done. How about drafting the bill in the first place? Like, industry groups and special interests have a big role in writing the actual bills, a big proportion of them in state legislatures across the country. And, sometimes it's not just contributing expertise to some parts of them, it's writing the whole bill.
Yeah.
Groups like ALEC, the very conservative American Legislative Exchange Council, distribute model bills that get introduced to local legislatures. And these are templates for new laws. They can range from, the Stand Your Ground law, in a lot of states is an ALEC-produced template. Things like abortion access limiting, other groups, not just conservative groups, they do things like taxes on sodas.
Yeah.
There was a 2019 investigation by some newspapers, USA Today, Arizona Republic, and the Center for Public Integrity that found 10,000 bills almost entirely copied from model legislation introduced nationwide over the course of 8 years. And more than 2,000 of those bills were signed into law. And when you think about it, it's just like what you talked to that academic about. It makes sense when most lawmakers who are elected to the state house or senate are pretty new to a lot of these issues, right? Like, you're coming in cold on something. Somebody like Chet has been around evictions and landlord-tenant law for years. And of course, new legislators are going to listen to those ideas and how it's going to affect the industry. Or, when a trade group has a suggested draft of an amendment to a bill, why not? Of course you'll listen.
And I should say, obviously Chet would argue he's representing the kind of landlord we want. We don't want corporate landlords. I'm representing small landlords. But, I also think about the fact that he has, you're right, he has a lot of experience. I think also about the lawmakers who leave the Capitol and they take lobbying jobs. Like, while Chet and I were standing in the hall, a former Democratic state senator walked by. You might remember Kevin Vandeweghe. He ran for commissioner of public lands. He retired last year, and immediately he's back in the Capitol making way more money. That's like not super common. It's much more common, though, for state employees to go into lobbying. 4 years ago, one analysis found 1 in 5 lobbyists in Olympia used to work for state government. And, you're right. Like, the lobby, whether it's for local governments or unions or businesses, they're going to be here a lot longer than the lawmakers.
Yeah. And they have put in their time to learn an issue, and therefore they can be more influential.
And learn the people, their allies and the enemies, and like where they can apply pressure.
Does this mean we should be paying lawmakers more and paying their staff more?
Oh, gosh, that's a whole other question.
Yeah. And I do think that white hat lobbyist you talked to, that's an example. He was a low-level legislative aide. He's doing a lot of the work, writing bills, doing analysis in the office. Well, I can guarantee he makes triple, quadruple what he was making in that job, right? And he has a lot more influence. But like, what if the people that we elected were able to, be a more full-time focused and rewarded on their jobs? Weird. I did not expect to wrap the episode up with a pitch to pay elected officials more.
Well, regardless of what we pay elected officials or what we pay lobbyists, I think if we all pay attention to what's going on in Olympia, like, we can be persistent too, right? Like, we can pay attention to what the lawmakers are doing, no matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans or they've been there 1 year or 10 or 20, right? Whether or not the lobby is trying to twist their arm to do something or, they are listening to the public. I think that's one of the only ways we can counteract like the influence of lobbies is to just really pay attention and ask critical questions.
I am letting the pay attention sink in, and I'll get back to you on that. That sounds like a volunteer position. And that's it for Sound Politics this week. I'm Libby Denkmann.
I'm Scott Greenstone. This episode was produced by Sarah Leibovitz and Jason Burrows. Our editor is Kat Smith.
And we'll be back next week with more Sound Politics. Consider supporting the show by making a donation if it makes sense for your budget. Link is in the show notes or at kuow.org/politics to give. See you next week.
See you next week.